The contemporary reading today is by Nadia Bowles-Weber. But inevitably, when I can't harm the people who harmed me, I just end up harming the people who love me. So maybe retaliation or holding on to anger about the harm done to me doesn't actually combat evil. Maybe it feeds it. In the end, if we're not careful, we can actually absorb the worst of our enemy and on some level even become them. Our scars are part of our story, but they are not its conclusion. The past is ours and will always be a part of us, and yet it is not all there is. It's a process, moving from wounds to scars to grief to showing those scars. It takes time, and maybe therapy, and maybe being vulnerable in community, and maybe working through the 12 steps, and maybe making a lot of mistakes, and maybe experiencing a tiny bit of joy.
Our scripture reading is found in Exodus chapter number 16, and I'll begin reading in verse number 2. The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out here into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain down bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them, whether they will follow my instruction or not. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "In the evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your complaining against the Lord. For what are we that you complain against us?" And Moses said, "When the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening and your fill of bread in the morning, because the Lord has heard the complaining that you utter against him, what are we? Your complaining is not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, 'Draw near to the Lord, for he has heard your complaining.'" And as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of Israelites, they looked toward the wilderness, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. The Lord spoke to Moses and said, "I have heard the complaining of the Israelites. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall have your fill of bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God." In the evening quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat." May God bless the reading and the hearing of this word. May we hear in it a word that is to us and that is for us on this day. If we were to be following this Exodus story from the beginning, we would know that it is about the people of Israel, that it is about their leader Moses, and that up until this moment, a centerpiece of the story has been a ruler known as Pharaoh. Pharaoh represents everything that oppresses and keeps people down. Pharaoh is what one of those hippies of the 60s, and I think we have a few in this room with us today. They would refer to the Pharaoh as the man. The man keeps you down. Pharaoh is bad, and he is oppressive, and he's abusive. See, Pharaoh is supposed to make us mad. So I'd ask, have you ever been mad? Well, of course you have. Ever been mad for a long time? Probably so. Ever woken up one day and realized that you have been mad for so long that your anger at whatever it is aimed at has begun to define you? Well, we'll come back to that one later, but let's move into the story. Pharaoh is bad, and he made the Israelites mad. Up until this moment in the story, Pharaoh has been the problem to be solved. There's been a struggle going on, and the struggle has been aimed at dealing with the Pharaoh problem. Well, where we find them in the story now, the Pharaoh problem has been dealt with. A number of plagues were sent down upon Egypt until Pharaoh finally relented and let the people go free. But then the Pharaoh, bad as he was, changed his mind and went out after the people in the desert. And this is where God famously parted the Red Sea, and the Israelites crossed over to safety, and Pharaoh's army was washed away. So a shift in the story is happening as we pick it up this morning, because there is no more Pharaoh problem. There's no more Pharaoh for the Israelites to be mad at, or for us as readers to be mad about. So back to the question. Have you ever been mad? Some people get mad at the church. Sometimes people get mad at a particular church and go to another church in the hopes that there'll be less to be mad at the other church. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it doesn't. Once, many years ago, a woman came to the church where I was the pastor and explained to me how she decided to come to our church. She told me that she liked me. It's always nice to hear. Not only did she like me, but she began to list the things about her former pastor that made her mad. And I happened to know her former pastor. And indeed, he was not nearly as nice a fellow as I was. I knew that to be true. There was, however, an inner voice which spoke to me and said, "Psst, Phil, she's going to get mad at you too." And she did. Sometimes we get mad. Sometimes we get mad at the government because they aren't doing the things we imagined that we elected them to do. Sometimes we should be mad at the government. Sometimes we get mad about some issue. Some issues are worth getting mad about. I get mad about issues. You've heard me go on about some issues from time to time. Sometimes we get mad because we see people being mistreated, and we should get mad when we see people being mistreated. The people of Israel had been mad at Pharaoh and the Egyptians for a long time. They all had a right to be mad, but now a change has taken place. Neither Pharaoh, nor his army, nor his mechanisms of oppression are around anymore. And so the question becomes, now what? If we're not the people mad at Pharaoh, who are we now? It's sort of a time of graduation for the people of Israel. They're graduating from a period in which they were just mad, and they moved into a period where they would be required to do some things and become some things that had nothing to do with being mad at Pharaoh. It was sort of a time of graduation. I would have been honored to have been asked to speak at their graduation. And so we're going to do some role-playing today. I'm going to be the graduation speaker, and you are going to be the people of Israel. And my graduation speech is titled, "Now That You Are Out of Egypt." It would begin something like this. I want to thank Moses and Aaron for asking me to speak today. For that matter, I should thank God, or Yahweh, as you call God, because Yahweh seems to speak out loud to you and your leader Moses a lot. So that leaves me to assume I was God's first choice too. That's how I'm going to choose to see it. It is an honor to be here with you on this special day, and I want you to remain after for a buffet of manna and quail. I'm happy that you made it this far. It wasn't long ago that you were slaves in Egypt, and I want you to know that me and some of my friends from the Congregational Church of Pinehurst, we were marching around Pharaoh's palace, carrying signs that said, "Let the people go." Well, as we say in the South, you must have gone and went, because you aren't in Egypt anymore, you're out here in the desert. You're graduating today from all of that oppression and forced labor, and you have a diploma with one word on it: freedom. Before we go and eat that manna and quail, I want to offer you some advice. I found some of it on the internet. Don't judge me. If Yahweh spoke out loud to me as often as he does you, I wouldn't need to go to the internet for sermon material. I feel a little strange offering advice to you, being that you are the chosen people, but here it goes anyway. And the truth is, I'll tell you, I learned what I didn't learn on the internet. I've learned from my mistakes and mistakes of people like me. So my first piece of advice is this: define yourself by what you stand for, and not just what you stand against. Define yourself by who you stand for, and not just who you stand against. Define yourself by what you want to create for yourself and others, and not just what you think needs to be torn down. You are a faith community, and people are always going to be watching and listening to faith communities. There's people out there that say faith communities will become irrelevant. I don't believe it. I believe as long as faith communities have something to say, people will listen. Let them hear about what you love and about who you love. Let them hear about what you are creating and building together. Those people who are listening and watching won't have a hard time finding angry voices. They won't have a hard time finding opposing voices. They won't have a hard time finding voices that are mad about one thing or the other. They will, however, want and even need to hear about people who are standing for something pure. People who are loving something or someone passionately. And people who are creating something together. Being mad will work for a while. It gets folks' attention when we're mad. But it's kind of like playing a guitar with one string. It isn't entertaining for very long. Be as quick or quicker to praise people and events which inspire you than you are to speak of the people and things which make you mad. I don't know what serves as social media in your world. You seem to have done a lot of your writing on rocks. But whatever it is, use it to tell people what you see in the world that is wonderful and mysterious and just plain awesome. For every one time you criticize somebody, let there be 10. No, 20 times that you encourage somebody and point out what you see them doing right. I know that it's hard right now because you have spent all those years back in Egypt under the oppressive rule of Pharaoh, but trust me about what people are going to remember about you. They will remember what and who you loved passionately, and not who and what you hated. They will remember that you stood up for widows and orphans and strangers in the land. And we need that, because just in case there are ever widows and orphans and strangers in our land, we're going to need somebody to teach us how to treat them. I know it's hard because after all that you have been through, it would be easy to be cynical and angry, but the world needs something else from you. That's your burden and your blessing. Sure, some forces need to be opposed, but when people ask who you are, let it be those things and those people that you love that define you. Now, for number 2. Treat with respect people who have less power than you do. You've spent all those years as slaves, and so you know what it feels like not to have power. Even now, as you set out into the wilderness, on the way to the promised land, things are different. You are free now to be whatever it is you're going to be. Whatever you're going to be is up to you. There is no more Pharaoh to blame. He's in your rearview mirror. So your character will no longer be defined by how you respond to that bad Pharaoh. It'll be defined in different ways. Character is defined in a lot of ways, but there is no better way or clearer way to define it than how we treat people who have less power than we do. So be nice to waiters and waitresses. They didn't overcook your quail or your manna. No, we don't look big or in charge when we put them in their place. They likely already know their place. And the fact that they're working for less than minimum wage and a few tips tells us pretty clearly they're trying to improve their place. So be good to them. Be kind to people who come for the first time to your synagogue or your church or whatever you call your place of meeting or worship. It's an intimidating experience to come into a room where everybody knows everybody except you. So make sure that you speak to them first, even before you speak to your friends or the people in your congregation who have power, even before you speak to your rabbi or preacher, no matter what a swell guy he might happen to be. If you're angry or upset about something, if you thought it would take only a week and a half to get through this wilderness and it ends up taking 40 years, don't take it out on people with less power and place and prestige than you have. That's just bad form. There really are lots of ways of defining character. Some of those ways are worthy of consideration, and some of them are just plain silly. But trust me on this, the most pinpoint, accurate way to define your character or my character or anyone's character is how we treat those who have less power than we do. So treat them well. Now for number 3. And like a lot of Baptist sermons, my speech has 3 points, and then I'm going to stop. And then we can go to that quail and manna buffet. Remember this. Remember that you are blessed. No matter where you are and no matter what you become, no matter how great you become, remember that you are blessed. And that's really the biggest truth that I get out of this manna and quail thing that you have going on. You complained and you grumbled and you murmured because you were hungry. And in response, Yahweh, who sometimes smites those who grumble and complain, instead of smiting or smoting or however you say it, he sent you a gift, manna and quail from heaven. You see, you are blessed. You need to remember that no matter how great you become, you're going to enter the promised land. You're going to become a great nation. You're going to give birth to the prophets. You're going to give birth to Jesus, who's going to mean a lot to people like me. But don't forget the manna. Remembering that you are blessed will make your life better, it will make your heart happier, and it will keep you humble. It will help you to do one really important thing and not to do another important thing. Remembering that you are blessed will help you to not take too much credit when you succeed. And it will help you not to blame somebody else too much when they fail. Remembering you are blessed will lead to all sorts of other good things. It will lead to compassion and generosity and to gratitude. I know what you might be thinking, because people in my world think this way too. You may be thinking that you got to where you got to because you worked hard. Well, you know what? That gene or that drive, which told you to work hard, you didn't create that, did you? You may make it to where you are because you're smart. But that mind that makes you smart, You didn't create that. You see, you're blessed. Maybe you had to overcome some things to make it, like Rocky Balboa. You don't know Rocky Balboa yet. He's an Italian guy who overcame a lot of things and did okay for himself. But you didn't create that inner strength which allowed you to overcome. You're blessed. In fact, ancient people of Israel, it was your faith more than any other which taught us that it is the Creator with a capital C who creates and is creating still. So be thankful for all that God has created in you and is still creating in you. Remember that you are blessed and you will be happy all the days of your life. And you know what? When you walk in a room, people will be happy to see you. That's it, my friends. Now that you are out of Egypt, there is no Pharaoh to blame. You have been blessed. So what will you do? What will you become? I'll close with some words spoken by one of your rabbis that I like a lot. He imagined your leader Moses speaking these words as you began your journey together. This is what he wrote. God only knows where this dance is going to take us. I have no idea where we're heading. Freedom. What a chance. What a dance we're taking. And he turned to begin stumbling along the pathway. I suppose it is pretty plain to see that we are as free as those ancient Israelites. And we have our own journey to take, our own dance to dance. And I suppose it's equally as plain to see that the same questions stand before us. So now, what will we do? And now, what will we become? Amen.